did two major motion pictures in Iran, Pear Tree and Vita. She has written a number of short story collections and memoir. Her first book was called I Too Am Che Guevara. Then she wrote Went to Sleep and The Great Lady of My Soul, which is a semi-autobiographical work. Goli combines really very astute sense of interpersonal relationships with an extraordinary sense of humor. And her work is very much appreciated in her own country, from which she is in semi-exile. She goes back and forth. Now, her last book was published in Iran. It's called Elsewhere, and it won the biggest prize for fiction in Iran, actually, even under the present circumstances, and it was reprinted a number of times within a short period. So she concerns herself with issues of censorship as well as freedom of expression and generally human rights. So Goli was going to, since the piece that she's going to be reading from has not been translated completely into English, she's going to describe as well as read sections as she goes along. So Goli.
Difficulties with publishing my books, how my other books have been banned, how another book has won a prize, but this is, these contradictions belong to a society where I come from. Iran is a society where you can receive the biggest prize and at the same time be put into a prison and then come out and then God knows what is awaiting you. But all these things, this is a country of possibilities. Everything is possible. And to be a writer and not to be a writer, to be free and not to be free, you never know. So this is at the same time gives you, a sort of a freedom, but a temporary freedom, but still it's there. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, I'm going to read you a short part of my last book, which has been written 22 years ago, and during these 22 years it's been developing and waiting to be published. My Monsieur Alef or Mr. Alef is about adventures of Mr. Alef in Paris. The reason he came to Paris is because I was there. And Mr. Alef at that time was 50 years old and he's 72 now. And I'm so worried about him that he may die before the book is published. Because every time that I go to Iran and I go to the Department of Censorship and I plead, they say that, is he still in Paris? He must come back. Didn't we told you the last time that he should come back? And I say that, well, he will come back, but at least let the book to be published. How could he come back? As if he's a real human being, he should, pack and come back. So, and then I want to, first of all, to talk a little about, how, under what conditions I, as a writer, write and try to publish, which is the same condition for other writers, women or men. It doesn't make any difference. Mrs. Afkhami gave a very flattering, encouraging, nice, civilized introduction about me, which is quite different than what is just published in Iran's daily, official daily newspaper, which I would like to read you this very sweet, flattering article about me, which says that this writer is a corrupt woman. She has sold her soul to the Western values because I live in Paris. And she's at the same time a very dangerous writer. That I don't know why, but we must absolutely stop her books and not allow her books to be published, because she is, don't forget, that the daughter of famous Mr. Taraghi, who wrote pornographic stories. You know, if you knew my father, and as I know my father was a very, very serious, right-minded, powerful man who, at least as far as I know him, maybe in secret, I don't know, but as far as I know him, he didn't know anything, or he had very little idea about erotic relationships, to the point that I was always surprised how my brother and I would even conceive. But now, he is a pornographic writer, you know. This is something new to me, at least. I can be proud of him, but of course it's not true. So, because of this article, anyway, right or not right, my last book was banned. And it was a very innocent story, a love story about a mermaid, a Muslim mermaid, living in the Caspian Sea. She's only 10 or 12 years old, and she wants to come up and see what's going on up there. So she comes up to the, even wearing, you know, scarf. And she comes up and she meets a young village boy passing by a donkey. And they're surprised to see each other, and they play, they really play, what can they do? You know? And they play, they talk, they tell each other about Earth, you know, the corruption of the Earth, the beauty of the sea. She wants to marry him. He says, no, 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 you're a fish. My brother is a butcher, he will eat you up. You know? And then, so they separate with grief and tears, and she goes back to the sea. The article says that the mermaid, this girl, and her name is, mermaid in Persian is Pari, and it says Pari as if, you know, she was a vulgar girl. This Pari was raped and abandoned, and her mother, which is the ocean, didn't even care, you know. So I was really surprised, and in an interview in Paris, I said, but how can you make love with a fish, you know? It's impossible. In our tradition, unfortunately, they speak of chickens and, or, you know, other animals, you know. Because in the book of questions and answers, which is a religious book, the man says that if I have an intimate relation with the chicken, do I have the right to eat it? And the answer never is that, why did you do that, you know, to this poor chicken? The answer is, you know, the chicken is already a roasted chicken, probably. That you shouldn't eat it yourself, never. But you can sell it to the third neighbor. So, with my mermaid and with the fish, you know, I could not imagine anything, but you really need to have a very strong and morbid imagination to find a way. But apparently there is a way. And what I want to tell you that under these circumstances, which is so absurd, so irrational, you know, you have to write, and I write, and other Iranian writers write. We publish. The most important thing is that nobody gives up, nobody sits back. The fight to claim the right, you know, my right as a writer that I claim and I want to obtain it and I will obtain it is somehow to express myself, to find a way to express myself and say what I want and to publish. So far I have published 6 books. And I see this resistance despite, this is the important thing, that no Iranian writer, especially women, gives up and sits back. Somehow they find, you know, they make a zigzag here and there, change their names, wait for a certain time, but then they go ahead. And this resistance is the spirit of all Iranians, especially Iranian women, that in every aspect you see it. Even for 22 years, you know, they fight, they constantly, they take them, they beat them, they put them in prison, they come out, they fight. I was just in Iran, I saw this desperate mullah in TV who said that, women, why are you so stubborn? What do we ask you? We don't ask you to go to, first, I didn't understand, to go to Japan and talk to the Japanese bombs to change the, to bring down the inflation. We just ask you to pull down this veil 2 inches. You don't do. We pull it down, you pull it back. We pull it down, you pull it back. We're just getting fed up and tired with you. What's wrong with you? So this is the spirit, and this spirit will finally win. So with my book, Bang, I take Mr. Alef, a lot of my friends for 22 years in Paris here. I've been talking to him. I drag him with me wherever I go. He's my everlasting, eternal companion, and they know about his adventures. But if you don't know, as I'm going to read just a very short part, I have to introduce him to you, And this Mr. Alef, Aghay Alef in Persian, is a professor of history that, because of certain events, he believed that at the beginning, like millions of people in this revolution, and he participated in a way, in a very, sort of looking, from far distance, but his heart was with his students, and because of certain things that happened, he decided to leave. He really was disappointed, and he decided to leave. So he comes to Paris, and this is exactly what happened to me. I came to Paris, and he came with me, and I wrote about his problems, his sufferings, everything that happens to him in exile. The problem of exile became very important for me. Exile in its different forms. You go to another country, is a sort of geographical exile. Exile from yourself. People even in Iran are in exile in a way. So I tried to write a book about all different forms of exile, even those who are there and who are outside. So I took the first chapter and I went and I wanted to publish it. And the man said that, he never said to me, why did you go? Because he probably thought I should better go. But he said to me that, why did you send this man, this professor of history that we need him? Why did you send him to Paris? Don't you know that Paris is a very corrupt, dangerous city? And I said that, no, he's a very nice man. Ever since I've been looking at him, he doesn't do anything wrong. He reads books, he tries to learn. No way, he must come back. He must come back right away. Not even at the end of the book, but right now. I thought, what will happen to the next chapters? Maybe that's not my problem, that's your problem. If he comes in the first chapter, there are other people waiting for him. What are they going to do? And he said that, I'm not concerned with them, you take care of them. So I said that, and then Mr. Alef said, I will never go back. Never. So I argued with him. He said, never, I will not go back, at least now. So this is, another stubborn ones, And then this time something new developed. I did the second chapter. I may publish the second chapter. The second chapter is about Mrs. Nabovat. So Mrs. Nabovat is a very close friend of Mr. Alef. For me, they love each other. But it's a very strange love that they never dare to declare it. So there's another one who says that she is a single woman in love with another man, they must get married. So Mr. Alef says, never over my dead body, I will not marry her. So she screams and says, never, I'm 50 years old and I will never marry him, never, not possible. So what am I supposed to do to people? I said to them, you don't go back, you don't want to get married, she doesn't want to get married. And then in this country, of course, you cannot be lovers, if you're not married. And so this is Mr. Alef, okay? We are here. At the first chapter, I published finally because at the end of the Mr. Alef says, he doesn't come. He says, I hate this city. This Paris is not my place. Tomorrow or next week, I will pack and go back. And the man said to me, no, you're not lying. I said, well, no, ask him. He's not lying, for sure. You promise. I said, I promise. So, this one is love problem of, I cannot exclude her. This is the whole big part of my novel. They never accept to be married, of course. The freedom, I give them the freedom. So here I am in the midst of all these confusions with all my writer and my characters, and we are getting too old, all of us, and soon we are waiting for something to happen in Iran, and if nothing happens, we will perish, and we leave it up to you. So this is, Mr. Alef now, at least, and I'm going to read you just an extrait of this book, which is translated into English. I'm not happy with the translation. Somebody did it very hurriedly, but I hope you will forgive me if the English is not very good. It's the day of departure. Mr. Alef finally decides to part. October 9, 1979. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The airport was in a state of confusion. There were pieces of unclaimed luggage in the middle of the hall, and security personnel in the midst of this commotion were looking for suspects, checking passports and travel papers. They were calling the passengers to the gates, and Mr. Alef had to hurry pulling his heavy handbag. The worst part was the body search. He had to strip, even take off his shoes and socks. He felt humiliated and wished to go back. Just leave his baggages and go home. What was it that forced him to leave home? Was it the fault of his students who had thrown a rock at his head? Or was it the fault of the Shah who had abandoned everything and left the country? Or was it the fault of the people or foreign intrigue? In the final analysis, it was his own fault for being indecisive and vague about his own ideals. Somehow he had trusted this revolution and the judgment of the masses. It was Mrs. Nabovat who told him to leave. For once, he really wanted to leave, but he never dared, and it was Mrs. Nabovat who told her, "Leave, go, don't be afraid. Maybe you find something new, maybe some new experience will come to you." But why? Why did he have to leave? If that horrible incident had not arrived, if that rock had not broken his head, he vividly remembered the events of that day. He was awakened early morning by the ringing of the telephone around 5 o'clock. Who could it be? Nobody answered. The phone kept ringing and ringing, but no one answered. What a stupid joke, he thought. He had a very early, hurried breakfast and headed for school at 8 o'clock. Classes were half closed, and school was in a state of turmoil. Teachers, uncertain and confused, lingered in the faculty lounge discussing political situation. On the wall, the door to his class was closed, locked. There was a poster on the door saying, "The traitorous teachers shall be executed." He looked at the poster. There was also a picture, a design resembling him greatly. He asked himself, who can it be? Do they mean me? But he was sure he was a very, very popular professor and he loved his students. But at the same time, students behaved oddly and clearly stayed out of his way. Something was going wrong. What? He saw Mrs. Nabovat coming towards him. He nodded to her. He took a cigarette. As he struck a match, his head exploded. The rock had hit his head just above the neck. For the first few seconds after the impact, he had completely blacked out. There was nothing but darkness and deathly silence. His heart, he couldn't hear anything, he couldn't feel anything. Pain had permeated his whole body. He could see people but was unable to assimilate the significance of their motions. there was Mrs. Nabuvat running towards him, dragging a student by the wrist. A shaft of sunlight penetrated his eyelids, and there were dark, pulsating circles everywhere. He had at first leaned against a tree, but then gradually slid down and was now lying on the ground. His brain was not functioning, and he could not feel the beating of his heart. The only external reality that he could recognize was the soft hand of Mrs. Nabuvat caressing his forehead. She told him, "Go away before it's too late. Go away, you will find new things, you will enter into a new history. Don't be afraid, something good is awaiting you." Maybe she was right. Looking around and remembering his life, he saw that he had never done something new, that his whole train of life is the same history that he's been teaching every day and every day. So, to hell with the past, to hell with the tribal and familial bonds, with paternal land and ancestral memories. He will leave. He will leave. Maybe he will find something new abroad. So I will stop here. My time is limited. This is Mr. Alef. What can I say? I just wanted to give you an idea of this book. And then if the book is finally published, I will come back here one day and I will say hello to you and I will give you a copy to each of you. Thank you very much.